Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. My name is Sarah and today we are going to go through my September wrap-up. So during the month of September I did finish 2 books that I had carried over from August. Then I did read a total of 3 books just within the month of September, and I am in the middle of 2 more. So I guess you could say 3, 5, or 7 are my total number of books read or in the middle of during the month of September, depending on how you want to quantify it. I usually say 5 since I haven't finished the 2 that I'm still working on, but then the 2 that I carried over from August I did technically finish in the month of September. I think both of them I was actually about halfway through, so I guess you could count that they were part of either month. I'm not sure. But we are gonna hop right into it. The first book that, again, was one that I carried over from August that I did finish this month was The Watchmaker's Daughter. It's the true story of World War II heroine Corrie Tenenbaum by Larry Loftus. This is a non-fiction book. So kind of what this author tried to do was take a lot of resources that surround World War II and Corrie's life, whether that be her first-hand experience, memoir and diary entries that she had written, or other works as well, and kind of compile all of those to give a greater overview of her life and her story and her family's life as well. Corrie lived in the Netherlands during World War II, and her family owned a watchmaking business. It says The Watchmaker's Daughter. She did in fact repair watches herself. And during World War II, they housed Jewish refugees as well as men that were trying to escape enlistment from the Germans during the German occupation of the Netherlands. It's kind of the story of her and her family hiding these people, as well as when they get captured, when they get arrested and sent to prison camp themselves, and then Corrie's release and kind of what she did moving forward with her life. And I know that sounds like I gave a lot of spoilers. It does actually cover all of that in the synopsis. I think kind of my 2 biggest complaints of this book was that the writing style is very dry. It does feel very academic in that sense of dryness, which is understandable because that's kind of the goal of this author's work. However, it wasn't as engaging as I wanted it to be just due to the dry writing style. There was also a lot of moments during like the first half where it felt a bit scattered or jumbled, where we would get a piece of Corrie's life and then we would zoom out to kind of the bigger picture of what's happening on a global scale during the war, and then we would jump to maybe an excerpt from Anne Frank's diary, as well as a couple other famous people. And while that was really interesting, I really wanted this to focus on Corrie's life specifically and kind of really get a more in-depth picture of her as a person and kind of what she did during her day-to-day life, and kind of just her personal relationships with people outside of just kind of the detail that we got on how they took in these refugees and housed them. And while, you know, that was all very interesting and we did get a lot of information about just kind of the relationships, it all felt very surface level, and I just wanted a bit more information about her. I mean, overall this really was a interesting read. I did just really enjoy it. I found it very informative. You know, I'd never heard of Corrie before this, so it was really great to learn about somebody who just did a lot of good in the world. And I will say one thing, this is very religion focused and religion heavy, just because Corrie's religion as a Christian was very important to her, and just a central pillar to her and her family's life, and it really drove her actions and then her speaking engagements that she was involved in after the war. So just kind of a heads up if that's not something that you're interested in reading about. That is a big part of this book. But overall, I really enjoyed it. I thought that it was really interesting, and I think if you're looking for a World War II general overview biography type book about different heroes during the war, I think you would enjoy picking this up. And then the second book that I finished from carrying over from the month of August into September was The MIM Order by Samantha Shannon. This is the second book in the Bone Season series. I have been doing a reread of this series in preparation for the 5th book, The Dark Mirror, that's coming out in February. I've been doing this reread with my friend Aparna, and we have been having a really great time. Both of us realized that there was a lot of just details and general storyline from these books that we had just completely forgotten about. Like, we had remembered the big main plot points, but there's so much that leads up to those big plot points that both of us had completely forgotten. And I just had a really great time with this. I know I've spoken a lot about it in some previous videos, just with, you know, reading the Bone season and carrying over into this, so I don't want to spend too much time with this, but I will say I think if you're looking for a series that really pulls in that vibe of like the early 2000s, 2010s dystopian era that had went on, I think The Hunger Games, The Maze Runner, Divergent, those kinds of books, if you're looking for that but a more refreshed feeling for it, definitely check these books out, because that really gives that vibe, yet adult, and again, just a new fresh look at it. It is very different than all of those books. We deal with kind of a re-envisioned version of our world. Specifically, these first two books are set in London. There are people that are clairvoyant. They have some sort of way that they interact with the spirit world, and that is illegal due to this Republic of Siam that has slowly been taking over Europe. Paige, our main character in the first book, is a very rare form of clairvoyant, and she does get arrested, and the book just kind of like breaks open from there, and you really get immersed into this world. Shannon's world building is just impeccable. Just had a really great time rereading this. So then after that, I read The Last Murder at the End of the World by Stuart Turton. This is actually one of my most anticipated releases of this year, specifically my most anticipated one for the beginning half of this year. This came out in May, and I did finally work up the courage to read it, and I did have a really great time with this. However, this is not one of my favorites of Stuart Turton's. That being said, I do think that it was done really well. So this is more of a sci-fi dystopian kind of post-apocalyptic murder mystery, which is very different than what his other books are. His other books are more historical settings, and this is much more futuristic. In this book, we are on this very secluded island with about 120 people on there, and then 3 scientists. And what happened was, this is the only kind of known island where this massive fog that has kind of taken over Earth and just rapidly killed people as it touches them has taken over. And so then these people are protected by this barrier that these scientists have set up, and they're just kind of happy to farm and fish and craft throughout the day. However, one day one of these scientists does show up murdered, and with that murder, the barrier that protects the island from the fog then deactivates, and they have a certain number of hours, it's under 100, in order to solve this murder mystery and hopefully reinstate the barrier that is protecting them from the fog. And I think that this book has done a really great job in creating this very self-included, kind of enclosed, post-apocalyptic scenario and post-apocalyptic kind of setting and world building. I think it did a really great job with that. It was just a very interesting kind of take on the sci-fi post-apocalyptic genre. And then when the murder mystery got added in, I feel like the murder mystery didn't really kick off until about the halfway point of this book. The murder itself doesn't happen until about page 100, and so much of the first 100 pages is just you getting yourself immersed into this world and getting an idea of kind of the baseline before everything gets flipped on its head. There are a lot of reveals that happen in this, but then just getting to know the characters as well. We follow a handful of main characters in this book. We do flip point of views quite frequently. In a way, we are actually reading from a first-person point of view, but then we get kind of from their perspective, the then point of view of various characters. Quite interesting actually how this is written. The chapters are also very short and snappy, which can either be good or bad depending on how you like your chapters. I happen to like it, but overall I think that this was done really well. I was a little disappointed in the murder mystery. For what this whole book was, I really enjoyed it, and I think it was done really well. I just think that it maybe didn't quite hit where his previous murder mysteries have. I do want to say that his kind of sense of chaos and just a multitude of moving parts that you see in his previous two books does come into play in this book as well. You see it here as well, which is really great. It's why I love Stuart Turton so much. With how much of an undertaking this creation of this like post-apocalyptic world was, and doing it in under 400 pages and adding a very complicated murder mystery into this. I think just the murder mystery did get hurt a little bit in the execution, but overall I did have a really great time with this, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. So then after that I read A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. This is I wouldn't say fantasy romance. It's kind of got it's more slow, quiet fantasy with a romantic element involved. We are on this Scottish-inspired island called Cadence, and we're following a main character, Jack, who is a bard. And about 10 years ago, he was sent off of the island to study to be a bard, and now has been called back because there are little girls that are being taken, snatched away. It is presumed that it is being done by the fairy folk on the island and kind of the elemental spirits. And he has been called back to help kind of solve this mystery. And this is a very whimsical, fantastical, kind of magical, quiet folklore feeling story. Fairy folk and kind of sprites, elemental magic type of situation here is very, very rich, and it's very beautiful. This is a very beautifully written story. It is quite slow paced. It is very quiet, and I did really like some of the characters that we follow. We basically follow Jack and then 3 other characters and kind of switch between their points of view. Jack was okay. He is kind of like pitched as the main character. However, I was much more invested in 2 of the side characters' stories. I don't know, something about them, I felt like they were more fleshed out than Jack the main character was, which was quite interesting. But I think overall this was just a bit too slow paced for me, and because Jack is the one that we're supposed to be really focused on and rooting for, and I just didn't feel nearly as connected to him as I did some of the side characters, this kind of just hurt my enjoyment of this book. I do think the kind of mystery element, reveals of it were pretty obvious in my opinion. I felt like it wasn't too hard to figure out, and I kind of guessed it pretty early on. For the most part, there was kind of one section, kind of the why reason. It did catch me off guard. I thought that it was a pretty good addition to this story. But overall, I had an okay time with it. I wasn't necessarily bored, but I wasn't as nearly gripped by this as I wanted to be. So I gave it 3 stars. And then the final book that I finished in the month of September was The Ghost Bride by Yan Shishu. This is a Chinese Malaysian inspired historical fantasy. We are following our main character who is in this kind of like genteel family, and however they are going bankrupt, and this other family that is very, very rich has asked her father to be, if she could be the ghost bride of the heir who has just recently died. Much of this book is following her as she does not want to be the ghost bride, but inadvertently gets wrapped up in the spirit world for various different reasons that would be spoilers if I went into them, and how she has to kind of navigate this spirit world and kind of what is questionably a murder mystery. I was quite disappointed in this book. Part of it was the writing style just did not do it for me. It was very simple in a way that felt very dry and almost clinical. The writing style just really hindered my enjoyment of this. It hindered my ability to really feel the main character's emotions and engage with them, just because I felt like I was being held at an arm's distance from the main character. This is quite slow-paced as well. I will say the last maybe 100 pages did have me much more engaged than the rest of the book. But yeah, I was not finding myself really having a great time with this. I was really sad that I was really lacking a connection to what was happening at all. Like, I found myself just not really caring. And I was really sad about that because I think the spirit world and how that was imagined and the things that were happening there, I wanted to be really immersed in that. I just couldn't find myself immersed or caring by the time that it really, like, the spirit world was starting to become a big part of this story. So I was quite disappointed in this. I think because I appreciated the folklore element being involved, and I did have a great time in kind of the last 100 pages. I did give this a 2.5 instead of lower, but yeah, this is a 2.5 star. Okay, and now we're going to talk about the 2 books that I am currently in the middle of moving out of September and into October. The first one being A Flicker in the Dark by Stacey Willingham. This is a thriller novel where we are following our main character, who is a medical psychologist, and growing up she lived in kind of a small town in Louisiana, and when she was about 12 years old in like 1999, girls about the age of 15 started disappearing in her small town. There was a total of 6 girls that disappeared and were murdered, and it turns out her father was the serial killer, and so he was put away into prison, and she grew up to become a psychologist to work with teenage kids. And we're fast forward into 2019, about 20 years later, where she lives in Baton Rouge, Louisiana now, and suddenly 15-year-old girls are starting to disappear again, and it is happening in a way that is very, very similar to how the girls disappeared 20 years ago. Her father is still in prison, and so she is finding herself, though, wrapped up in this mystery of what is happening to these girls and who is responsible. And we're kind of bouncing back and forth between her reliving things that happened when she was 12 and things that are happening in today's timeline. She is a very anxiety-riddled main character, and that just kind of heightens the sense of tension in this book. I think that's done really well. These chapters are fairly short. They're not too terribly long. They're kind of just your average chapter length that you find in thrillers. I do have my suspicions of who is involved. However, I think my suspicions are too obvious, and I don't think it's going to be the case. Right now, this book is just okay. Like, I am very intrigued. I am engaged. I'm not, like, super gripped by it right now, but I am really liking kind of following from our main character's perspective. I just think that she's got a very interesting kind of look at things and kind of this internal conflict that she's dealing with, just on top of the external conflict that she's finally finding herself wrapped up in. So overall, I'm having a good time. I am roughly halfway through right now, page 154. But yeah, I don't have much more to say about this. I kind of have a feeling that when I finish this, it's gonna be one of those that I'm just kind of like, I don't have a lot to say about. I read it, it was okay, because that's kind of how it's feeling right now, but we will see. And then the final book that I'm reading, that I'm carrying over into October, is actually an audiobook that I'm listening to, and that is Cannibalism, A Perfectly Natural History by Bill Shute. I'm listening to this for the book club that I'm part of. I, of course, obviously did not finish it in time for our discussion. I actually missed our discussion, but that's okay. I am still enjoying this. I'm finding it quite interesting. This book talks about exactly what the title says, cannibalism and kind of the natural history behind it. We do start for about maybe the first half or so, just simply covering some specific cases of cannibalism in the animal kingdom, kind of the history of the study of cannibalism in the animal kingdom, and how for a long time it wasn't something that was really focused on or studied. The difference between what people perceived it to be versus what it actually is in terms of prevalence and reasoning is quite interesting. And then about the second half has been following unique cases of cannibalism in kind of human history, whether that be kind of ritualistic cannibalism with different cultures. It talks a lot about actually kind of how the fear of cannibalism played a part in colonialism, which was quite interesting, and then kind of unique survival situations that involved cannibalism biggest example is the Donner Party. He is covering that in this book. Yeah, it's quite interesting. I would say that the author is kind of funny at times. He's got a bit of this like sly, dry humor to him. But yeah, overall, I'm having a good time with it, and I am looking forward to finishing it and kind of, you know, wrapping up everything that he has to say with that. So those are the 5 books that I finished in the month of September, and then the 2 books that I am carrying over into October. I think overall I had a pretty solid reading month. Nothing that wasn't a reread that didn't really stand out to me, but overall it was a pretty solid reading month. If you've read any of these books or you're looking to read any of them, let me know down in the comments below. I always love to hear from you guys. But as always, I really appreciate you guys watching this video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!